Hi, I'm Mitchell Ringos. Welcome to Word for Word, where we offer you an in-depth look at some of our interviews with newsmakers from across the region. You'll have the opportunity to hear word for word how they responded to the news of the day. The homeowner who discovered she had over 100 sticks of old dynamite buried in her backyard is talking about the frightening experience. Police were called to the home on Marlborough Street after crews installing a fence discovered what appeared to be explosives.
Julie, what did you find in your backyard?
Well, I didn't. The fellows putting in the fence were digging a post hole and found a bunch of sticks of dynamite, and then it just sort of grew from there about how many sticks of dynamite there were, and so it was a day-long assessment of how much and whatnot. But the post hole fellow hit it, and then stopped production sort of on the fence. But
So what did you do next?
So someone came to the door and said that they had found dynamite in the backyard, and of course my first reaction was I was terrified of what that means and should we get out of the house, and they said no, they thought the risk was low and they thought it was very, very old dynamite. So just hang tight and they would keep us updated, and everybody was very communicative about what we should do and whether or not we should be in the house or leave or that kind of thing, and in the end we were in the house all day and it was not an issue. But I gather they informed the neighbors and no one was to go in their backyard or sort of that kind of thing, and the school was notified and that kind of thing across the street. So I mean, emotionally I fluctuated between terrified and laughing so hard because it's just such a surreal experience and thing to have happened, and once we knew it was sort of the risk was very low, then I was able to just sort of focus on what a story this is for the rest of my life, and my kids are young adults and this is their story of their backyard. So
What have you found out from Thunder Bay Police about the originator of that dynamite?
Yeah, so it was actually, I can't recall if it was the city police or OPP, but apparently in the 60s, early 60s, there was a truck that a case of dynamite had fallen off of. And they're linking it back to that. So it was never fully recovered. They weren't sure how much of it had been recovered, but in the end, so there were the loose pieces, but as they dug further and sort of extracted it all, it was a burlap sack and a box full of this expired dynamite. So it's all speculation about whether or not that's what it is, but the age sort of aligns, and so that's kind of what we're thinking it might be.
Wow. So they got it all out and took it away, and that's pretty much the end for you, right?
That's the end for me, but it was quite a process to watch. There was a backhoe here that sort of dug a really large hole so that they could just focus on what was around and make sure there was nothing else that had sort of fallen out farther, and so they were piece by piece taking out this box and filtering through all of the soil that they had dug out to get all of the little bits as well, and then the city took that contaminated soil away and brought back clean soil and gravel. So I'm told it's safe, and all of the explosive stuff would have seeped out years and years ago over the 60 years, but so the risk was really not much, for the past number of years that we've lived here. But
any guesses how many sticks of dynamite were in the box?
Well, it was 2 buckets full, so 2 large buckets full. I guess in what had gone missing in the 60s, if it was 96 sticks of dynamite, and they thought it was more than that. So I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah.
Could you just describe what that looked like when they pulled it out? Like you said, it's a bucket, but maybe just describe what that was.
Well, I mean, I was sort of watching from inside of the house as they were pulling it out, and it was just more and more, and they had it all sort of laid out, and then in the end it was in these 2 buckets that were quite full. I asked if I could take a picture and they said no. So it's awesome, and I mean it in the it's such a surreal is the word that I can use to describe it. I just having a stick of dynamite, but having that much dynamite. My nephew actually works at a mine, and he said that would have flattened your house, and one of the officers said it probably would have taken out a good chunk of the block had it actually been live and that sort of thing. So from the outset, it was pretty quick that they had determined it was so old and it was so broken down that the risk was very, very low. So that those what could have happened were very unlikely and not going to happen. But I guess they were worried because it had broken down, it may have been unstable. So, but yeah.
Did it just look like red sticks of dynamite like you see in the old movies?
No, it was beige, and it was a company in Thunder Bay that I guess no longer exists, a CIL company, and there were different types. There was 40% and 75%. So it was like a faded beige and a darker faded beige. So two different types, but no red, and they had no caps and there were no detonators. It was just the sticks.
So now you can build your fence?
Now the fence fellows were supposed to be back this morning, so I'm hoping that they're not, frightened to come back. Yeah, but my Friday deadline has been extended to next week now, so.
Lakehead University held a grand opening ceremony this week for the new Climate Action Park on the banks of Lake Tamblin, where work is underway to restore the green space behind the campus. Attendees gathered around the freshly expanded fire pit to learn about local vegetation, conservation efforts, and to hear from community members who contributed to envisioning the space.
Tell me about today and the groundbreaking.
Yeah, so here we are at the opening of what we call the Lakehead Climate Action Park. So climate action parks are an initiative that are happening sort of globally, and they're about retrofitting and restoring green space. And so here we are on the shores of the McIntyre River and Lake Tamblin and our Climate Action Park, which has involved a range of changes to the landscape that are in the name of climate action. So things like our choir logs here, riparian zone protection. We've just done a lot of indigenous plantings, and we also have a fire in this space to support gathering and learning about climate action and climate change as well.
Could you tell me about the area in particular, specifically this area, and why it was chosen?
Well, this is of course an important ecological region. This is the riparian zone, but also it's a space that sort of, I don't know if you'll have any video here, but you'll see that it's a nice place that invites gathering. So we wanted this to be a place that not only is sort of restoring ecological processes in the name of climate action, but also a place to invite our university community members, our broader community members, and it really is a place to sort of see the importance of human and land relationships, so that we also want it to be a place where folks could sort of reflect on human land and human place relationships in a really sort of beautiful and inviting space. And we also have some signage that sort of invite that kind of reflection on human land and human place relationships.
Tell me about some of the engagement that students have been able to have with this area in particular.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the engagement really started a few years ago because we wanted to hear from students, but also faculty and staff in the university, and also our community partners about what a climate action park here in this place on the shores of the McIntyre River and on traditional territory of Fort William First Nation, what should a climate action park look like, feel like, and do? So that was the first place in which our students and also other folks at the university engaged to share their vision and to share what they would like to see from this project. And now that the park is open, that the space is open, just this week we've had grade 9 students here for something called the Climate Change Forum. And we're learning about climate adaptation, for example, and we also are having this week a 4-day sort of intensive teaching learning experience called the Climate Action Field School with high school students. So we've been using this space as our home base and doing lots of sharing and learning and engaging and lots of experiential learning around climate change and climate action in a range of ways. Yeah.
That is really cool. I heard that there's also a park in Fisherman's Park down by Current River. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so these were projects that sort of got started on the same time around this idea of climate action parks here in Thunder Bay. And so ours is called the Climate Action Park, and theirs, really at the mouth of this river, is the Climate Awareness Park. And so, that's another great place to go see and check out. And they sort of took a different approach, but they also restored the land and have some educational materials and signage as well. And so they're connected. And one of the things we hope to do in the future is develop some basically like an interpretive walk that would involve probably starting there and walking up along here and learning about the river, learning about the lake, learning about plants, learning about climate change and solutions to climate change as we walk.
Well, this is our climate action park. So when you look around, you can see a few additional features added to the park, but in general, it's also a work in progress. And the park really symbolizes a naturalization of the space and envisioning different concepts out of the spaces that we spend time in to reflect issues in the world, action towards addressing issues in the world, environmental problems and social problems. It's more of a celebration, it feels now, because for the last couple of years we've been engaging with different groups and designers and doing that hard work of getting through the pandemic and setting it up. So it's nice to see people, just able to relax, plant a few basic plants, do the final touches on what we had planned this year. And it's good to see people enjoying themselves and enjoying the space.
You mentioned it was a work in or it is rather a work in progress. So what are the plans for the future?
Well, we have a bit of naturalization that we've done planting. We've created a shoreline that's more amenable to herptiles or reptiles and frogs and turtles. We're going to allow some of the vegetation to grow a bit more to reduce the runoff into the river. And then, unlike a landscaped park, the idea is to allow people to ongoingly, add to the park if they see a space or a species of plant that they would like to represent, or if someone has some learning objectives in one of their class that they can use the space for, that they can add to that. So it's sort of an idea that we're developing and using the space and evolving it over time, sort of like nature would, I suppose.
Yeah, I can imagine this is useful to have for the field school courses too, right?
Yeah, and definitely, obviously campus is always open to the community, but this particular place was about attracting people to come to campus and to sort of envision those spaces as well and use the space. And the space is also reflective of a number of restoration projects going on around the city by a number of stakeholders that sort of represent similar things: rewilding, renaturalizing, and sort of using the space in the urban environment to connect a bit more with ourselves and nature.
Very cool. Is there anything in particular you want to add, or anything you'd like to say that I haven't touched base on?
Well, like you said, it's a welcome space for people to come to, but there's a lot of opportunities for people in the community to volunteer at spaces like this, planting and restoring. It's a great way to spend time with your kids and be part of community.
Earlier this week, around 350 conference delegates from around the world traveled to Thunder Bay for the C2U Expo. The four-day event hosted by Lakehead University is meant to connect communities and make collective change.
Sir, you're here today touring Algonquin School with an entourage from Lakehead University.
Yes.
What are you going to see here today? What do you expect to see here?
Well, what we expect to see here is a couple of things. One is this school has been quite entrenched in the strength-based approach to engaging students and their families.
Mm-hmm.
And so you will see some indicators of the strength-based approach. For example, things like a strengths wall of students, so that when anyone comes into the classroom, they can easily see what are the top 2 strengths of students in the school.
Okay.
Yeah. The intent is to engage students on their strengths in order for them to deal with their challenges.
All right. Now, how does that transition into, say, post-secondary education and then eventually a career?
Right. So the way that it transitions, a couple of ways that it transitions also. One is that if students are aware of their strengths, they start to internalize it. So for example, if a student is very kind and they keep being told that they're very kind, ultimately they believe they're kind, and that becomes part of their personality that they then take into the high school, and then they take into their post-secondary. So it becomes part of your personality if you firmly believe that what people are telling you is what you should know about yourself.
Okay. And how does that transition into, like I said, a career or
Yes,
your life,
right.
especially a career?
Right. So I think one of the key things is that one thing we try to encourage students is whenever they're faced with a challenge, to think about a strength that they may have to deal with that challenge. For example, if you have a conflict with a student, if you're a leader, if you've been told that your strength is leadership, then in leadership you should be able to develop a way to deal with conflict. So again, if you deal with that, and as you transition into post-secondary and in life in general, conflicts arise invariably. So if you're taught that use your strengths to deal with that conflict as opposed to simply deal with the conflict, it becomes a way of problem solving. So that's what we're trying to engage students to.
So would you say then, sir, what they're doing, particularly at Algonquin School
Yes,
today,
yes.
is setting these students up for their future, for their life?
Absolutely. And in fact, the programs that we do here starts in JK. And this principle, Darren Lenz, has been one of the most dominant principles around engaging and embracing a strengths-based approach.
Sure.
He also does a lot of work in the indigenous culture, trying to engage school students and families from a position of their own culture also.
Sure.
So this is a well-grounded school.
And how does this tie into the expo as a whole? I know obviously run by LU, there's multiple days left, but why is it important to get out into these small schools,
Right.
and what influence does this
Sure.
have?
So the main reason is that a key focus of the conference is to show the connection that the university has with community stakeholders. So this particular event was developed so that attendees to the conference are able to come and actually see the end result of the connection between the university and schools, and actually experience it, and so that they can go back with some understanding of how the university interacts with community stakeholders to promote students' well-being. So it's been a big focus of this community, of this particular conference.
Just to start, obviously a multi-day event through Lakehead, through these schools, can you just talk about the importance for Lakehead of putting this event on?
Well, first of all, we're really thrilled to be hosting this. This is a international conference. It's through Community-Based Research Canada, and they go out and ask universities if they would like to host these conferences. And we think that, Lakehead University has a really strong research profile, but especially in community-based and working with organizations. So it fit very well with who we are. We were excited about the opportunity of having the first in-person conference again since 2017. And so we jumped at the opportunity, and it's a chance for us to show Thunder Bay, a chance for us to show the research we're doing here, but also to bring people together.
And those people coming in are all from around the world. Why was it so important to have so many different backgrounds involved in this?
They are from all over the world. We've got about 350 delegates, and they're from all sorts of countries. 70% of these people who are here are from outside of the Thunder Bay region. Community-based research is a type of research that really is not just within certain boundaries. So we will learn from people from other parts of the world, what they're doing, their structures they've set up, but we're also going to they'll learn from us. And, those are kind of those connections I think are actually going to be the most exciting ones to have.
And how was the process of kind of picking where you were going to go for this? Obviously starting at Algonquin, how did that kind of come about?
So the first day today is the conference workshop. So the actual conference starts tonight with a opening ceremonies, and then the actual conference part, which are much more things like, presentation, orals, roundtables, are for the next 2.5 days. Today was a conference workshop. So this morning we had all sorts of things, but the afternoon we said, let's get out into the community and let's connect with certain research projects that we think people are going to be excited to see. So we got Roots to Harvest, we got a sustainability walk, but we also have this one here at Algonquin School, which is highlighting the research of Dr. Ed Rowana.
And obviously I heard this was the first time LU's ever done something like this. Is this something that can be looked forward to every year or potentially again in the future?
So they hold this conference every 2 years, and you have to put in a bid. So we probably won't get this again for many years. But Lakehead has a pretty good experience about putting on different conferences. It is a bit of a challenge when you're putting one on after a pandemic and 350 people and bringing them all in from different parts of it. So there's a lot of logistics that are happening, but I take every one of these as a bit of an opportunity to learn for the next time as well.
Thanks for joining us for today's edition of Word for Word. We'll be back next week with more interviews from across the Northwest.